It was, don't remember too much, it was just, there was, food was nil. There was some hot water with some kohlrabi floating in there, very, 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 not enough. But every day came more and more people came into the camp. There was, my father, as I said, was in the men's barrack. He later on started working in a kind of wood factory what they had. There were other, not all Jewish, there were German war criminals, communist men there, women I don't know, but they were there because they were all signified. They had a little round, would denote the color, what you were. Red was a criminal, the other was a homosexual, that was it, and they had those, the men there too in the men's barracks. So my father started working there, and there was also a kind of a seamstress, there was a little fur industry, and there was a sewing factory was there too, and some men were working outside Vught in a town to do with heavy construction. So they were out of the camp and they came back.
And where were you?
I was with the women's barrack. I vaguely think they tried to let me work in the fur industry, but I didn't do anything. I just must have floated around.
What was the daily routine like?
That is all that I don't know. There were lots of babies in that camp. There were also two women, how you call them? Women who are supervising us, and Aufseher you call them, the one who
supervised.
Supervisor tried to do tricks with us. We had to stand long hours on appel, yeah. Is there an English word for it? I don't know. And long hours there, and they tried to play tricks on us. One sometimes said, now you have to stand and do like the dogs pee. So every woman had to start with a leg like that. You know, they had a sadistic pleasure in that. And they had fun with us. But then the Philips, in the meantime, Philips was starting with the little factory, with the factory. I didn't know it at that time. Then, as I said, there were many babies were there. And that was too much. The babies were apparently not treated too well. And there were needed too many people and nurses, so they decided the camp has to be trimmed. And all in June 43, the people, the kids from babies still until 16 years had to be deported. And they had to have one parent with them. And that was the third time, and the last time my father saved my life, because at that time I was 15 years old. And I had to go. My father took me outside of the camp, but that time and that day was on. He talked with one of the officers. I didn't see him. I had to wait outside while I was witness to lots of women and women on stretchers who had just given birth, baby in the little premature babies in the little basket were outside to be hauled on two buses. Before that, just a short while before that happened, I met a relative of mine, and that was an aunt, was a relative of my mother. She was there with her two children. And by coincidence, I met her because her name was Van Bingen, and that was my mother's maiden name. So I was quite happy to have a relative there. At that time, the coincidence how I met her, it was at that time still for me in the camp a little bit embarrassing. I just caught lice, head lice. And it was horrible. And she just met me when I had one of those things on my head to get rid of the lice. And that was just as an incident, you know, because at the most time you want to have a relative, I met her. And it was nice to have her, although for a brief time. And what I remember so is because I was waiting for the officers of the SS there in Vught outside the camp, close, and she came out with her 2 children, and she called me to join her in the bus. And I said, no, I can't. I have to wait for my father. If I would have listened to her, well, he didn't. I said, no, my father is here. I have to wait till he comes back. That was the last I saw of her. And later on I heard that the children and the mothers and all them, they went transported to Sobibor. And the rest is, you know. So then at that time they also had too much people, beside when the children were gone, the people who worked in the atelier, the seamstress and the fur industry, they were all disbanded. All those people who worked there were also being deported to Westerbork. Everybody went by the train to the northern part, because Westerbork was the the gateway to hell, you can call it. From the gateway from Westerbork they went deported straight to Auschwitz. And so those people were deported too. In the meantime there was, like you say, for employment by the Philips. Philips choose people to be working in their little factory.
How did they choose?
Well, they told people who were a little bit in the commune, in the man or so, you are, and there were probably people also from Eindhoven. We call them civil person, because they were not like us. They were working for Philips, but they were coming daily, were leaving for home in Eindhoven. So they choose people if you had good eyesight, or because of the special work what you were doing, supposed to do. I was chosen too, although my eyesight was not so hot at that for far. They chose me, and quite a few people too.
How is it that they chose you? Was it?
You had to do a little examination with the eye, look here and there. But I mean, they knew that, because one of our own had to choose, so they choose as many people as possible, naturally. So then we started working there, and then before that I started working there. My father, who was at that time very ill, it was undernourishment. His face, his legs, his whole body was swollen from edema, too much water and the bad food, because we never received any parcels. We had nobody else. Some people were there and still received Red Cross parcels. They were sometimes allowed to bring to them, sometimes the Germans and the SS took them and ate them. My father, it was around on Appel, and there were people who were just going and transport to Germany, and they eliminated the people who were sick at that time. They chose them all because they were not good, they couldn't work. And there was one incident that, I don't know, my father, why he had to come forward in the middle while all the people were standing there on Appel, and apparently whatever they asked him, or the answer was not satisfactory. And then one of the SS kicked him, and he fell on the floor. If you can describe that thing, if you see that somebody is kicking your father, and you can do anything about, and he was already sick. The next day that transport was to be gone. He managed to come to the women's quarters on the outside. It was all barbed wire. And the last I got, he said goodbye, and I got a kiss, put a barbed wire from him, and that was it. That was my father. But he, at that third time, he was able to save my life. Also, on the other side, when some comic things, more or less, it was still, there was some theater and some entertainment was sometimes going on in Vught. And I don't think I attended it, but I heard about it. Kids were singing, and at that time when the kids were still there. And there are some songs, but sometimes they sing, and if I hear them, I cringe. I remember those kids. There also the funny part, or comic part, is that they had put on the barbed wire bottles and glass and bells. So why? Because still, although they put some stuff in the food that inhibits the
Sexual
desires, it didn't work. So apparently for some men, and they tried Albert to climb the barbed wire and went into the women's barracks. So when you knew that, I mean, I was a child still, but still, when you heard it clink, you knew there's so much time to get in. I think quite a couple succeeded, I think. That was the semi-comic part of that. And on Sundays, we were allowed visits in the beginning from the men, visited the children or the husbands, visited the wives. That was still allowed in the beginning. Now, then I started to work with Philips, and it was some flashlights, but primitive flashlights, what you move with your hand, and then that produces the lights. No clue how it is in English, but that's what what they made on the assembly line. And I was soldering something for the fluorescent lights, for transformers, for the fluorescent lights in the airplanes. That's what they
So
said.
you
I
were
liked the work. I was sitting in a machine and I was soldering, and I didn't mind that. I liked that.
So you were connecting metal together with heat?
Yeah, soldering. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. I have still
Okay.
something here that I had dropped it on my finger and it was hot. There was also issued food. They called the Philips product, the Philips food. It was special food what you used to have at home. They were allowed in big vats or to transport it from Eindhoven to the camp, and especially the children, the young people, were twice or 3 times a week were given that extra food in addition to the lousy camp food that we had anyway. Whatever it was, it's not enough. So that went on to June 1944.
Was the work for Philips in the camp?
Yes, it was in the camp. That was definitely in the camp. Yes, we were in barracks.
And who was supervising the workers?
I don't know, it must be somebody. Germans were around there too, naturally.
Did you have somebody making sure you were working properly?
Maybe, yes. That could be. Naturally, I assume it would be.
Okay.
Then, without an eventful, what also happened during that time is that we had sometimes to undress and to, that was their pleasure or whatever, to undress and to go to see if we were all healthy and we had no lice. And that's also happened. Otherwise, as I can recall, we went on our way to...
Were there, excuse me, Lenny, were there times when the Germans threatened the operation of the Philips workers? Perhaps where the Germans wanted to take the Philips workers away?
No, not yet.
That occurred only later?
Yes,
okay.
it occurred later.
Please continue.
Yes, what I try to think, but at the moment I don't have any more recollection of that. It's just more or less, how do you say, a normal working trend. I realized that in the meantime, before that, people were deported from Vught to West to work, but that was before the Philips. Then there was just the Philips group together, men, women, and non-Jewish men, non-Jewish women. They were working there.
Now you call it the Philips group.
Yes.
How many were?
I think I read it. I had a newspaper what was written. I think it was maybe 200. I don't know exactly. I don't know. Just don't forget, I know. I'm recollecting when I was 15 years old. I don't know how many people. Maybe 200, maybe 100. There was It could be 200 because men and women, Jewish men and women were working, non-Jews too.
Were all the Jewish people from Holland?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Then in June 44 the invasion started, and they, I think they want to eliminate the camp, so the Germans took us to the train, tried to. It was during the day, and during the day the Philips was working, and Philips executives, you call it, were there too from Eindhoven, and one way or another they got word that we were about to be deported to Germany, wherever, at that time, we don't know. So they thwarted the effort of the Germans, and whatever they did, the Germans put us back in the barracks, and for the next, I don't know how long, a week, 2 weeks, week and a half, we were working, and then in the middle of the night, they took us from our bed, hopped into the train, and over the border. We heard later on that even while we were in the train, we heard that, you know, rumors fly always, that in cattle cars we were deported to, and we ended up in Auschwitz-Birkenau. The Philips tried desperately to save us, and they even sent a cable to Auschwitz, but we were in the middle of Germany. They were unable to save us. So the train went on, and this was the Jewish part of the Philips group. The non-Jewish part of the Philips group was, and the women were deported in September 1943, and they were sent to Ravensbrück. It's also a well-known camp, Ravensbrück. It's by the non-Jewish women from Philips in September. Then the camp was no camp anymore. We arrived during the night in Auschwitz-Birkenau. A commanding officer was standing while I was on the platform. We had some small children with us from Philips, but we all remained in one group. He said, this is the Philips group from Eindhoven. He said another name, but from Eindhoven. We were all headed into shower rooms, and there we had to take our clothes off and remain there the whole night without any clothing, without food, naturally, nothing. The next morning the inmates came and told us what kind of a camp Birkenau Auschwitz was, what was going on, and crematoria and so on. Then we were all tattooed. We all got a number.
Did you believe what you were being told?
Mm-hmm.
And how did it make you feel?
I don't know, we were in shock anyway. You were more or less an automaton. It's I don't know if I can recall any thought. Sure, scared, yes. But you behaved with a group. You were not an individual. That was the purpose of it, to deaden you. You were not an individual anymore, too much. I mean, I was not. I was just 16 at that time, right? So we were tattooed. The woman made a little error there and she did it over again. The children who were there from Philips, they were tattooed under the arms, in the inside. And the children remained in Auschwitz till the end, because it was the Philips group. Because apparently we were considered, we were a labor force and of use to the German. That's why they didn't do with us what they did with the other people. The part of our group remained in Birkenau for 4 days. After 4 days, that part of the group left. And our group, including me, the rest remained in Auschwitz, and we were scared. Because we thought, we knew what was going to happen, and we saw it, if that is going to happen to us. As far as I can recall, we stood on appel day and night, and whatever they wanted to, cold and hungry, whatever. it was horrible. We had to do our business sometimes in a wheelbarrow, and that's it. And sorry, disturb me. Well, I remember one day, that the only day I worked, and that was, they told us to carry bricks from some place to the railroad. On that day, I was very close to the crematorium and to the tower. And when the railroad arriving, it was in the summer, a Hungarian transport with people. And there I saw with my own eyes the selection. What was going on? I saw the women, with young children, the elderly people, other people. I saw them being selected. And later on, the smoke went up. That was a day, if there wouldn't have been a barrier between on the railroad, I would have gone too. I would have joined the Hungarians. That was my feeling. Okay, that was that one day that we worked at, we had to work at the carrying bricks to and fro the railway station and witnessing the arrival and selection of an Hungarian transport. To mention too, ironic that when the people arrived, the impression they had, whatever they had, they came with garden chairs, with lawn chairs, with umbrellas, and so it was all down there on the railway tracks. They thought they maybe, whatever they thought. It was a bitter disillusionment naturally for them. That was that only day that we had to work. As people know, there was also very moments for me of desperation. I was alone. People were involved with themselves, or whoever had groups. I was a child that didn't belong. How you say it here, was geen fish and geen fleisch. It was just moving around with actually not a few people I could talk to, but not too good. I mean, how can you describe that, the state you were in? There was electrified wire around Auschwitz, and I knew that. And I didn't do it, no, but there was many occasion or temptation for me to go to the wire and to end it one and for all. As mentioned, naturally, I didn't do it. Then there was, a couple of weeks later, there was also an incident that I heard from somebody who was in a sick barrack that my cousin and his sister were in a sick barrack. And although we didn't have much contact with them in normal life, I wanted to visit them. And the date that I marked that it was able for me to squeeze out somehow to go to visit them in the sick barrack was the date the Germans chose for us to leave Auschwitz. We didn't know at that time, but we were called in a big room, and there was the usual customary, take off your clothing and stand the parade for the SS so they can look you up and down. I was so nervous, I remember vividly, I developed a rash all over my body. And then I thought, and that compounded it, I thought, oh my God, they see that rash, they think I have an infectious disease, now it's done with me completely. Then I see one S, he comes to me and he looks me up and down. And because everybody had to be separately, I don't know, looked up and down, he said, okay, go. So I was not saved, I didn't have to stay. We all left Auschwitz, or Birkenau at that time then, and we put on a train. And actually you're not being told where you're going. We arrived at a place, and there we had to work, and the place was called Reichenbach. R-E-A, I have to spell R-E. Was called Reichenbach in Germany. And there, when we were led to the barracks, we found that the people, the rest of the Philips people was there already, who left us 4 days after they arrived in Auschwitz. And actually, I mean, we were very, very glad, and we were one more or less family or group again. We were put to work in Telefunken. What the camp we were was quite a distance from Telefunken, but we had to walk through the snow, and in the winter was it? Yes, we left Auschwitz in August. Yes, and we were there in June, 6 weeks, July, August, we left Auschwitz, and we walked all the way to the factory. The factory was work, and a huge factory. It was more or less in a kind of a glass cage. More or less the same work as what I did in Holland. But I couldn't work too well. We had 12-hour shifts. We had barely enough to eat, barely enough to sleep. Our sleep was interrupted by the bombings, what the Air Force did, the English Air Force. So they didn't produce. And many a time that I just remember falling asleep, and then one of those supervisors came and, yep, you worked, you're up again, and you woke up again. There was there naturally a washroom, and it was the communication room where we get the latest news, what is the war, when it's finished, and wow, where are the Russians, and you know, what's happening. We were timed when we went past the desk, son of a gun, one of the supervisors, and so we were timed that we're not too long, because naturally they knew what was going on. There was also one woman there. She was herself, and not from the camp, she lived there, but she was also forced to work there. She was very, very nice. She called me by, let's say, Miss Mossel, you know, you have no name, nothing. So Fräulein or Miss Mossel, that she had respect, and she felt for us, but there's not much she can do. Some other women I know got something, but they were older, they knew how to walk the ropes, I didn't. So that was our time there. I developed typhus there at that time from drinking the water in Auschwitz, because they told us while we were standing there that whole night in the shower room in Auschwitz, don't drink the water. Well, we were thirsty, we didn't get anything, so we drank. And later on I developed typhus. I was very, very sick. And with me in the sick barrack was another girl, a girl from my street. She was dying. And so the one who are dying, they were transported back to Auschwitz. There was also one girl from Philips who was a naughty girl, got pregnant by one of the capos in Vught. She was starting to show. Back to Auschwitz and cremated. That was Reichenbach. There is not, beside the bombings and the workings and the deprivation of sleep or hunger, you existed there. Then there was one night, so that was August, we remained in Reichenbach around till, I don't know the middle of the end, but until February 1945.
Now, excuse me, Lenny. How was there competition amongst the Philips group of girls for better jobs or better advancement?
No, nothing.
How did they treat each other in the group? Was it a friendly?
I think so. I think so. With the young girls together, younger girls. I was the youngest, but one of the teenagers, or 18, 19 years old, together. No, not like that. No. Yeah, maybe not that I know of. Put it that way. I don't think there was any put for advancement because what's the use of an advancement? You're in the same boat, the same rotten boat. The Germans are after you. Then the war started to come closer and closer. We heard the fighting, we heard the shooting during the night, the bombing, and we made jokes already. The Russians are going to liberate us. And that was February 1945. I now read now that January 45 Auschwitz was liberated. Well, we didn't know. We were a distance from that. Then we did one night, our group with girls didn't do too much work. As usual, we didn't know then. We didn't do too much work. We went home during the night. We went in our bed. We were taken from our bed in the morning, and everybody had to stand on a bell, and they had to, 13 girls, including me, were chosen to have punishment because we didn't work, we didn't make our production. And there was one woman there, and she was the spokeswoman for us, or put herself up for spokeswoman. And we could choose to 25 beatings on your rear end or cutting off your hair. Well, she managed to make that our hair was cut off. So we had the men from, was a camp close by, Kroosrozen, it's very well known too, was in a neighborhood there when one man too had to cut off all our hair. We were allowed to have something on our head while we were walking from the barracks to the factory, but while we were in the factory, we had to show the people what we were doing and how we were punished. Well, okay, that's what we did. So all kinds of things we put on our head, and that was one incident. And there was incidents, you know, was very, very primitive with washrooms. There was no washroom. There was just, it was a kind of a covered barrack, you say. What you have sometimes too, you called latrines, what the soldiers maybe have, it's a hole with a pail underneath. Everybody had his duty done, and you had to carry the pail. And sometimes you slipped and it was icy. There was no way that you properly had soap or whatever. I wondered sometimes that not more illnesses or sicknesses occurred in that time. But then we had maybe the luck that there was cold. There's one incident too. There was incidents, you say, it's comic, tragic. A woman, she was together there with her sister-in-law, and they slept together in the bed. And one morning the woman said to her sister, oh, she said, I had a warm bath. It was a wheelbarrow full of urine, and she washed herself. Now she screamed when she found out. So it's tragicomic. So that was the life there till they handed us in to leave, and we went into walk for 100 kilometers into the, how you say, the Eulengebirge by Czechoslovakia. It's the Owl Mountains, you call it. Through snow. We first slept in where you keep stay horses stables. And one occasion, I know we just left the horse stables in the morning. There was one consolation. The SS slept with us there too. They had no other accommodation, so they walked with us just the same. They got a little bit better, more food, but they walked with us. And after we left that horse stable, it was bombed. Then we walked on the back and on the mountains. I have actually no collection. What clothes, what shoes, nothing what I had on that time. And that was another time that I felt desperate and wanted to sit down in the snow. And I said I had enough. But some girls were together. I met them later on. They said, come on. So they pushed me up and let's go. From then on, we went to successively to camps. And actually not camps, it were not actually concentration camps, it were just barracks where they could put us up for the night. Then how we started to go by cattle car, I don't know. After that walk, we went from one sleeping place, put it that way, to another. We came on one, and it was called Beendorf. It was a salt mine, and there I met the mother of my girlfriend. And were happy to see, but I lost her again. We left that camp, then after a couple of days again, and the Germans emptied the camp and threw all kind of clothes invested with lice onto us, and we had to carry it. There also gypsies left the camp, and they were with us on the transport. Then that was a transport there, from there to another place. There was a woman there, the wife of a Dutch comedian. The gypsies were positioned by the Germans into the cattle car so they could do the dirty work. They had to do the dirty work. I don't know, the gypsies had displeasure with the woman, maybe they didn't like her. And she was in a wagon next to me. They tortured her to death with putting drops of water or letting it steadily. And the woman, the screams and the screams and the scream of the woman for days was horrible. Well, finally, naturally, they killed her. I had to sit with the gypsies too once because I don't know what I did. They was punishment, so they pushed and they pummeled me. But that was it. There was a dividing line. There was the entrance, and we were there, and the gypsies were on the other side. So as punishment, I had to sit in between them. So then I came back to the own one. There was no water. If there was water, DSS, so the women or men, just threw the water into the cattle car, but didn't give us to drink. So the women in desperation started to drink their own urine. They had to have something. And I still remember having it in my hand, and then the tray made a sudden movement, fell out of my hand, and I never drank it. I also vividly remember that I had, delusions, or I went out of it, because I know exactly the feeling. I was there, but I was walking in a, like your conscience does that, I was walking in a big, big room, just wandering around. I still remember that feeling. Although because, we were so tightly packed together, and that's why you escape. And that feeling, I remembered very much, walking in a big, big, big room. Because, well, so finally we somewhere ended, they stopped, and they opened the doors and we could get out. And then had some water, and we are outside. Then in another place continued our travel. Another place we were led out on a grassy area, more or less in the bush. There we were able to wash a little bit and to wander around too. Although we had to be careful because there were still air raids and so on going on. That was Beendorf. We were also close by a town in East Germany, still from Leipzig. The train had to stop because of engine trouble. And in the meantime, they bombarded the train station in Leipzig. Later on, we could travel further, and it was all March 1945. We were also at that time we were in open cattle wagons, and it was freezing. We were standing the night in front of the camp of Bergen-Belsen. And I remember they wanted to get rid of us, and they asked, like in a hotel, we want those people in there, those women. And Bergen-Belsen, it was too full, packed, no accommodation. So they had to carry us further. Then we went to another tower, several names, and then we went, the last one was one of the last one was Porta Westfalica. That was, as I remember, we had Appel outside in the green grassy area. It was nice, you saw the nature. I remember when we were at Appel, there was people there on the mountain, they were filming us. And the Germans saw that, and they put the dogs up to the people, to see what was, because we were a ragged bunch, naturally, at that time. They tried to put us to work in the caves, because originally there was a